Washington doesn't feel dangerous. It feels wet, green, quiet, moss on everything, mist sitting low in the firs, a coastline that looks more like a postcard for solitude than a place to fear. There are no venomous snakes worth mentioning here, no scorpions, none of the desert's obvious warnings. And that absence is exactly what makes people careless. The danger in Washington isn't loud. It doesn't rattle or coil. It moves quietly through old-growth forest, or it swims beside the ferry, or it stands in the salmonberry thicket exactly where the trail narrows. And the rain that keeps everyone's head down is the same rain that's always covered its tracks. Locals who've spent a lifetime under this canopy don't measure danger by how much noise a place makes. They measure it by how easy it is to stop paying attention here and how much this landscape rewards exactly that mistake. Unlike states built around a single obvious icon, a rattlesnake, a gator, a bear, Washington's danger is distributed, spread thin across 10 different animals that mostly rely on the same trick, staying quiet enough, common enough, or well camouflaged enough that nobody bothers to be careful around them. Here are 10 animals sharing Washington with you, starting with the quiet ones almost nobody thinks to watch for under all that green. Ticks are Washington's most consistent, least dramatic threat, clinging to tall grass and low brush across the state's forests and river corridors, waiting for a passing leg to brush against exactly the right blade of grass. Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses circulate through the state's tick population, and the classic transmission window closes quietly, often before a hiker ever feels the bite happening. Washington's mild, wet climate keeps ticks active across a longer stretch of the year than drier states ever have to account for, which means the danger here isn't confined to a single season the way most people assume. Hikers on the state's popular western trails, the exact routes lined with the ferns and undergrowth this climate is famous for, are told to do a full body check after every hike because the same lush vegetation that makes these trails so photogenic is precisely the habitat ticks depend on. Yellowjackets cause a surprisingly high number of Washington's wildlife-related emergency room visits every year, more than most people would ever guess for an insect this common. Unlike bees, yellowjackets can sting repeatedly without dying, and their nests, often built underground or tucked into structural voids, are frequently disturbed without warning by a lawnmower, a garden shovel, or a hiking boot, landing in exactly the wrong spot. Washington's late summer and early fall bring the state's highest yellowjacket activity, precisely the season when picnics, harvest festivals, and outdoor gatherings put the most people in close contact with nests nobody knew were there. Unlike a wasp nest built visibly under an eave, an underground yellowjacket colony gives almost no warning before it's disturbed, which is exactly why so many stings in Washington happen in ones and twos rather than as an isolated freak accident, an entire family walking across the same patch of lawn in succession. Western black widow spiders build their webs in the same undisturbed, sheltered corners. Washington's mild, damp climate provides an abundance: wood piles, garden sheds, the underside of porch furniture left untouched through a rainy season. Their neurotoxic venom causes severe muscle cramping and abdominal pain, intense enough to be mistaken for a medical emergency of a completely different kind, and the state's persistent moisture, usually associated with mushrooms and moss rather than spiders, creates exactly the sheltered, humid microhabitats this species prefers. Longtime Washington gardeners know to shake out gloves and check under stacked wood before reaching in, a small habit most visitors never think to copy. It's a species most people associate with drier climates entirely, which makes it exactly the kind of overlooked risk this state specializes in, an animal nobody expects because the postcard version of Washington doesn't include spiders at all. Black-tailed deer are one of the most familiar sights in Washington, grazing along roadsides and suburban edges with an ease that's made most people stop thinking of them as wildlife at all. That familiarity becomes a real risk every fall, when the rut brings a measurable spike in buck aggression and a corresponding spike in vehicle collisions on roads winding through wooded areas statewide. A buck defending territory during rut has charged people who got too close without recognizing the warning signs, a reminder that even Washington's most familiar, least feared animal carries real risk during a specific few weeks every year. State transportation officials post deer crossing advisories along the worst stretches of wooded highway every autumn, a pattern so consistent it's become as reliable a seasonal marker as the leaves changing color. Those four are the ones the rain and the routine make easy to overlook entirely. What comes next moves through the forest itself. Animals locals respect, not because they're loud, but because Washington's dense, wet timber gives them exactly the cover they need to stay unseen. This is where the state's real signature danger starts to take shape, not a single dramatic predator, but an entire ecosystem built around staying hidden in plain sight. Washington has one of the highest rates of cougar-human range overlap anywhere in the country, a direct result of how much of the state's forested land sits close to where people actually live. Cougars are solitary, ambush-built predators capable of remarkable stealth, even in terrain that seems too open to hide anything. And the vast majority of cougar sightings in Washington involve an animal that was already aware of a person's presence long before that person ever noticed the cougar. Direct attacks remain rare, but the state's wildlife officials give consistent advice for exactly this reason. Make yourself look large, hold eye contact, and never run. Because in cougar country, the animal has almost always already made its assessment before a hiker even realizes there's a decision to make. What makes Washington's cougar population particularly notable is how much of it exists within a short drive of major population centers, not confined to remote backcountry, the way most people assume a large predator would be. Cougars have been documented moving through greenbelts and forested corridors connecting directly to suburban neighborhoods, using exactly the kind of fragmented tree-lined terrain that development has left behind, which means the range overlap this state is known for isn't a wilderness statistic. It's an everyday reality for communities that border any significant stretch of forest. Black bears range across much of Washington's forested terrain, adaptable enough to thrive near trailheads, campgrounds, and even the edges of some suburban neighborhoods pressed up against wooded greenbelts. Most encounters end without incident because a healthy black bear generally wants distance from people, See, but food conditioning remains a persistent problem around Washington's most popular hiking corridors, where bears that have learned to associate a trailhead parking lot or a campsite cooler with an easy meal behave in ways a genuinely wild bear never would. The overlap between bear habitat and Washington's booming outdoor recreation culture has only grown tighter over the years. More trailheads, more weekend hikers, more coolers left unattended for just long enough. Washington state wildlife officers spend real resources every season trying to reverse habituation patterns that took years of careless food storage to build. A bear that's learned a specific trailhead means an easy meal rarely unlearns that lesson on its own, which is why bear-proof storage requirements at Washington's most popular hiking corridors have become as strictly enforced as any other backcountry regulation in the state. Roosevelt elk, the largest elk subspecies in North America, roam Washington's coastal rainforest and Olympic Peninsula in numbers substantial enough that encounters with hikers are routine rather than rare. During the fall rut, bulls competing for territory become dramatically more aggressive and unpredictable, and Washington's popular elk viewing areas see a predictable rise in charging incidents every autumn, almost always involving visitors who underestimated how fast and how far an agitated bull will close distance when it feels crowded or challenged for dominance. These are the largest elk in North America by body size, which means the margin for misjudging a bull's mood during rutting season is considerably smaller than visitors from other elk viewing states might expect. A Roosevelt bull at full size dwarfs the elk most visitors picture from photographs of other western states, and that scale alone changes the stakes of getting too close for a better shot. Those three explain why Washington's forest, despite its quiet reputation, still produces a steady stream of genuine wildlife encounters every year. What's left lives where the trees give way to water, along a coastline and a strait that most visitors assume is calm, simply because it looks that way from a ferry deck, where the same green, mist-softened postcard image extends straight out over water-hiding animals, every bit as capable of surprise as anything under the canopy. Orcas move through Washington's inland waters, the Salish Sea, and the straits around the San Juan Islands in numbers that draw whale-watching tours from around the world. And while direct attacks on people remain essentially unheard of, rare but real incidents involving boats and kayaks have occurred, orcas investigating or interacting with small vessels closely enough to cause damage or capsize them. These are highly intelligent, coordinated predators, and Washington's marine safety guidelines around orca encounters exist specifically because an animal this large, moving with that much curiosity and that little natural wariness of small boats, doesn't need aggression to become a genuine hazard on the water. Local pod movements are tracked closely enough by researchers and whale watch operators that recreational boaters in the San Juan Islands can often check reported sightings before heading out, a small precaution that's become second nature to anyone who spends real time on these waters. Washington's docks and harbors host harbor seals and sea lions that have grown remarkably comfortable around fishing boats, marinas, and the people who use them daily. Most encounters are harmless, but sea lions in particular have become bold enough around fish cleaning stations and crowded docks to act aggressively toward anyone standing between them and an easy meal, and a large sea lion defending territory on a public pier is capable of serious injury to someone who doesn't give it the space it's already decided it wants. Marina staff along Washington's coast treat habituated sea lions the same way park rangers treat food-conditioned bears, an animal that's learned people mean food and behaves accordingly. Some Washington harbors have had to install dedicated barriers and deterrents, specifically to keep sea lions off docks and boat platforms, a sign of just how comfortable this species has grown around the state's fishing and marina culture over the years. That's 9 ways Washington's quiet, green landscape can turn dangerous. Venom, stings, hooves, curiosity, and territory defended without warning. And if you had to guess which single animal actually defines the real risk hiding under all this rain and canopy, your mind has probably already circled back to the one this whole video opened with a warning about. It was there in the hook before a single entry had even been named, waiting in exactly the kind of quiet the rest of this list has been building toward the entire time. The cougar is Washington's true number 1, and not because it's the most likely animal to hurt you. Statistically, it remains one of the rarest genuine threats on this entire list. It's the true number 1 because it represents exactly the kind of danger this state specializes in: quiet, watching, patient, capable of observing a hiker from cover for long stretches without that hiker ever knowing an animal was there at all. Washington's wildlife biologists who've studied cougar behavior through tracking collars have documented animals following hiking trails at a careful distance for extended periods, never approaching, simply present, which is a genuinely unsettling fact. Most visitors never learn until after their trip is already over. That's the defining shape of danger in this state, not the loud rattle of a snake or the obvious silhouette of a bear at a distance, but something built entirely around not being noticed until it decides otherwise. Consider what that actually means set against everything else on this list. A tick has to be brushed against. A yellowjacket nest has to be physically disturbed. An elk or a deer has to be approached too closely before it reacts. Every other entry here requires some kind of contact, some crossing of a line the animal didn't choose. The cougar is the one exception, an animal that can be present, watching, and gone again without a single moment of contact ever occurring, which means most of Washington's cougar encounters aren't encounters at all in any way the hiker involved ever registers. They're simply moments the cougar decided not to escalate, and there is no way to know how many of those moments happen on any given trail on any given day. And that's the real shape of the thesis this whole list has been building toward. Washington never needed venom or teeth on obvious display to be dangerous. It just needed the rain, the moss, the quiet green cover that convinces every visitor nothing here could possibly be watching. The cougar moving through old growth timber, the orca investigating a kayak a little too closely, the yellowjacket nest hidden under a lawn nobody thought twice about. None of them announced themselves the way the story in most people's heads expects. That's the trade this state makes with everyone who visits it. No rattlesnakes to fear, no scorpions to check your boots for, and in exchange, an entire ecosystem of quiet, patient animals that have gotten very good at being close without ever being seen. The rain that keeps everyone's head down has always been doing exactly what it was doing from the very first line of this list, covering the tracks of everything that was already close enough to matter. If you found this fascinating, hit subscribe for more stories like this.